They showed up with bulldozers at dawn. No warning, no letter, no courtesy knock, just the low growl of machinery as it crept up my gravel driveway, sunlight glinting off steel. I ran outside still in my flannel pajamas, heart pounding, only to watch helplessly as the homeowners association razed my grandfather's old barn to the ground. The place I'd spent summers fixing tractors, storing hay, and making memories was gone in less than an hour. Dust in the wind. All because of a supposed code violation. No hearing. No appeals. Just demolition. I live on a stretch of land tucked between forest and lake, a bit forgotten by time. When my grandfather passed, he left me everything: house, land, and a damn good reason to stay grounded. But what he also left me was something far more powerful than I ever realized: control of the dam that feeds into the resort community's prized lake. The same lake their million-dollar homes overlook. The same lake their kids swim in, their guests kayak on, and their marketing brochures proudly display with shimmering sunset photos. You see, I'd always kept things simple. Stayed out of HOA drama. I didn't care about their cookie-cutter lawns or their ridiculous fence paint restrictions. I kept to my own property, maintained the dam like my grandfather taught me, and let them enjoy their resort lifestyle. Until they came for me. Until they made it personal. After they destroyed my barn, I started digging. I found emails. Backdoor deals. HOA board members pushing for development and viewing my land as an eyesore. They saw me as a stubborn relic in the way of their expansion plans. But they underestimated just how deep my roots went, and how far I was willing to go. So, when I shut the dam's floodgate and drained their pristine lake to a muddy, reeking puddle, I wasn't acting out of spite. I was showing them what happens when you back the wrong person into a corner. But here's the thing, they didn't just lose their lake. They lost control. And that's when everything started to unravel. Because once that water disappeared, secrets hidden at the bottom came to light. Secrets they never thought would surface. And now? They're scrambling. I didn't always live like this, on the edge of town, half-wild land all around me and silence as my only neighbor. There was a time I wore a tie to work, commuted into the city, had meetings, deadlines. But when Grandpa passed and left me the property, I came back. I told myself I'd settle his affairs, maybe sell the place. But then I walked out behind the house and saw that old barn, half-leaning, stubbornly standing just like he'd left it. Tools still on the wall. A coffee mug still on the shelf. His spirit lingered in that place like the walls themselves remembered him. So I stayed. The HOA was never fond of that decision. Technically, I lived just outside their official boundary. But the barn, the dam, and part of the stream that fed their lake all sat on land they wanted. Over the years, they made their intentions clear: letters, offers, pressure. One board member even tried to guilt me, talking about how my neglected property was affecting their neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. That was their term, not mine. Still, I never thought they'd take it this far. They claimed the barn was a safety hazard. Said it was unsound and unregistered. But I'd had it inspected just last year. It wasn't about safety, it was about power. And leverage. They thought if they took something from me, I'd fold. Maybe even sell. But they didn't know me. And they definitely didn't understand the dam. It was built long before their gated resort existed. My grandfather helped pour the concrete himself, and the water rights were clearly in his name, and now mine. I never touched the controls because I never needed to. But the moment that bulldozer came down my hill, that wheel at the base of the dam became the most important object in my world. After the lake drained, panic set in fast. I heard the HOA president was on the phone with the county by that afternoon. Homeowners were posting angry updates online. One guy even threatened to sue me for emotional distress. The fish died, boats sat in mud, and the smell, well, lake beds aren't meant to see sunlight. But what really got them wasn't the mud. It was what the water left behind. A sunken ATV. A rusted metal drum. And bones. That last part? Not an animal's. Sheriff's deputies showed up within hours. I watched from the tree line as they taped off the shore and hauled away the evidence. I recognized one of the officers he used to mow lawns with me back in high school. Now he was walking around my grandfather's dam like it was a crime scene. And the HOA? Dead silent. For the first time, no one was knocking on my door. No emails. No threats. Just quiet. But quiet like the air before a storm. Because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. They called me a troublemaker, a recluse, even a saboteur. But none of them knew the full story. After the bones surfaced, the resort community went from pitchfork-wielding rage to paranoid silence. Deputies patrolled daily. HOA meetings went from potlucks to private, password-protected Zoom calls. The lake that once reflected their picture-perfect world had become a graveyard mirror, and everyone was wondering who was next to drown in its secrets. But here's the twist. I didn't drain the lake to uncover a crime. I did it to make a point. And now I wasn't sure if I'd pushed too far. The sheriff's office cordoned off my dam. They said it was part of an active investigation. But I could tell they didn't trust me. Neither did my neighbors. I'd see them peeking through blinds, their once cheery waves now clenched into fists in their pockets. One guy left a dead fish in my mailbox. Another keyed my truck. It was getting uglier by the day. But the worst of it came from within. Cassie, my ex, showed up out of nowhere, 10 years gone and still able to throw my balance off like a lightning strike. She was a forensic tech now, working with the sheriff's department. She said she didn't ask for the assignment, claimed it was random. But I saw something in her eyes when she stood at the edge of the lakebed, boots sinking into the mud. Recognition. Regret. Back when we were teenagers, we used to sneak into that same lake at night. She knew this place. She knew Grandpa. And when I asked her quietly, away from the others, if she thought the bones could be older, she didn't answer right away. She just looked out at the waterless pit and said, "You shouldn't have drained it." The investigation pulled in old names, people from my grandfather's past. Former HOA founders, local developers, and one man who had mysteriously vanished 18 years ago after a dispute over land rights. A man I vaguely remembered from a photo in Grandpa's study grinning next to a red truck. The same truck now rotting in the lakebed. It was becoming clear I tripped a wire I didn't know existed. And the HOA? They weren't just upset about the lost lake. They were scared, panicked, and for good reason. One board member, Mrs. Kendricks, the most outspoken voice against my property, went silent. Deleted her social media. Skipped every meeting. Some said she left town. Others whispered she had a breakdown. Either way, someone had silenced her. Whether by fear, guilt, or something worse, I didn't know. Meanwhile, I was spiraling. Not outwardly, not the way they expected. But inside, I questioned if I'd crossed a line. If proving a point about property rights was worth stirring whatever darkness had been hiding beneath that water. And worse, if Grandpa had known. What if the dam wasn't just about water management? What if he was guarding something? I found his old notebooks, hidden behind the barn's remaining wall frame. Pages torn, some burned. But what I could make out made my stomach turn. References to unofficial meetings, payoffs, and one phrase scrawled more than once. The lake hides what the town forgets. This wasn't just about me anymore. And now the whole town was remembering. Too fast, too loud, too dangerous. Because when you expose rot that's been buried for decades, you don't just shake a few foundations. You risk bringing the whole thing down. The rain came without warning. One moment the sky was dry and breathless. The next, a sheet of water dropped like judgment from above, pounding the cracked lakebed, stirring up mud, swallowing tracks, and erasing evidence. I stood at the dam, soaked, boots slipping in the runoff, watching the reservoir try to reclaim what I'd taken. It was too late. Too much had already surfaced. The sheriff's office had confirmed it. Human remains. Male. Estimated to have died nearly 2 decades ago. Cause? Undetermined but consistent with blunt force trauma. That was the phrase Cassie used. Cold. Professional. But I could see the flicker in her jaw when she said it. She knew I'd read Grandpa's notebook. Knew I'd found the name, Evan Rourke. The missing man. The one tied to a land dispute that ended suddenly with no witnesses, no closure. A man who once accused the HOA of laundering money through shell development companies. And then vanished. My grandfather was one of the last people seen with him. I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to imagine that the man who taught me to fish, to build fences, to trust the land, could also bury bodies under it. But the notebook didn't lie. And now the HOA was unraveling like a sweater caught on barbed wire. 2 board members had resigned. One lawyered up. And someone had broken into my house. They didn't take anything. Just moved things. Left my grandfather's notebook open on the table. To a page I hadn't found yet. It had one line on it: "If the dam ever breaks, tell Cassie the truth." The dam breaks. Not if it's opened. Not drained. Breaks. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't just disturbed a crime scene. I'd triggered a safeguard. This place wasn't just storing water. It was hiding leverage. Insurance. Grandpa had built the dam not just to protect land, but to hold power over the people who once wronged him. People who made him choose between silence and justice. And I just pulled the pin. That night Cassie came back. Wet, shivering, scared. She told me someone followed her home. That the department was warning her to back off the case. That the HOA was cleaning house. We sat on the porch, lightning clawing the sky behind the bare trees. "You think your granddad did it?" she asked. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure anymore if the question was who killed Evan Rourke. Or who else knew. Because if the dam was ever meant to be a warning, not a floodgate, but a time bomb, then what was waiting behind the last pages of that notebook? And why did Grandpa want her to know? Cassie looked at me and whispered, "There's a second body." I froze. Where? She looked at the barn. And for the first time I heard thunder without lightning. Because someone else was already in there. The barn door creaked louder than it should have. Cassie and I froze. Whoever was inside wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. I stepped off the porch, every muscle in my body braced, heart hammering like it wanted out. She grabbed my arm, whispered, "We need to call someone." But I kept walking. Not because I was brave. Because I had to know. The rain thinned to a mist, as if even the storm wanted to listen. Inside the barn, the beam of my flashlight cut through rot and shadows and landed on a man I hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. Rick Kendricks. Mrs. Kendrick's son. The one who'd been expelled from high school after a hunting accident. The one who'd disappeared before his 18th birthday and supposedly moved out of state. He turned slowly, soaked and pale, holding a crowbar in one hand, the old metal lockbox in the other. "Didn't think anyone be out here in the rain," he muttered. "Guess that was dumb." Cassie stepped beside me. Her breath caught. Rick smiled crooked. "She found the second body, didn't she?" I didn't respond. He dropped the box with a loud clang. "It's not what you think." But it was. Because inside that lockbox were photos. Documents. A map. And a confession letter from my grandfather. Not to the police. Not to the HOA. To Rick. The handwriting was unmistakable. In it, Grandpa confessed to helping cover up Evan Rourke's death, not because he committed it, but because he was protecting someone else. Rick. He was only 17. Angry. Violent. Rourke had been pressuring Rick's mother, blackmailing her over misused HOA funds. Rick confronted him. It got physical. Rourke didn't survive. So Grandpa buried the body. Built the dam. Bought the silence. It had never been about the land. It was about keeping a kid's mistake from destroying a family. But Rick wasn't a kid anymore. And he was tired of hiding. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," he said, voice low, shaking. "But they're cleaning house now. You said it yourself. The second body? That's Mrs. Kendrick's. They buried her 2 nights ago. In the woods behind Lot 12. Cassie gasped. That's when I realized what was happening. The HOA wasn't just trying to erase a mistake. They were eliminating loose ends. We were loose ends. Rick dropped the crowbar. "They won't stop. You think draining the lake scared them? That was nothing. They've been laundering money, fixing elections, covering up crimes since before you were born. The lake just made it harder to hide." Cassie reached for her phone. I grabbed her wrist. "No police," I said. "Not yet. We were in too deep. The police couldn't stop this. Not if they were in on it. If the HOA had turned its back on its own, how far would they go now?" Cassie looked at me. "What do we do?" Rick answered first. "We expose it. All of it. Tonight." He opened the lockbox wider. Inside, beneath the papers, was a thumb drive. And a gun. The barn lights flickered. Outside, a car engine revved. Headlights flashed across the mud. Someone else had come. Not to talk. And not to run. The engine outside cut off. For a moment, everything went still except the rain, tapping the barn roof like a ticking clock. Rick raised the gun. Cassie grabbed my arm. I stepped forward toward the door, heart thudding like thunder in my chest. Whoever was out there wasn't waiting long. Heavy footsteps splashed through the mud, deliberate and slow. Then the silhouette appeared. HOA President Tom Whitaker. Hair slicked back from the rain. Leather gloves. Calm. Too calm. He looked at Rick, then at me. I figured you'd find the letter, he said, stepping fully into the barn, unbothered by the tension or the weapon pointed at his chest. That old man was sentimental. Should have burned the whole thing. Rick's grip on the gun tightened. You buried my mother. Whitaker gave a small, mirthless smile. Your mother made herself a liability. You know the rules. You always knew. My stomach dropped. You knew, I said. You've been doing this for years. Since the first cement was poured around this lake, Whitaker replied. The dam? The barn? All of it? Just old men trying to keep newer men in line. But time changes the game. He stepped closer. Cassie's voice shook. Don't move. Whitaker looked at her like she was an afterthought. You should have stayed in the city, Miss Dawson. Rick shouted, back off. But Whitaker didn't. He kept walking until Rick pulled the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. Whitaker didn't flinch. You thought I'd come here without planning for every detail? Then he reached into his coat. But before he could pull anything out, Cassie moved. Fast. She slammed the flashlight into his face, knocking him sideways into the crate. The gun tumbled from Rick's hand in the chaos. I dove after it, grabbing it just as Whitaker staggered up, blood in his mouth, hatred in his eyes. This ends now. I shouted. But it didn't end how I expected. Whitaker laughed. And then, from outside, the ground rumbled. The dam. The storm had done what I never did, it cracked the concrete. Water, withheld for weeks, was now raging down the spillway, screaming toward the dry lake bed. Whitaker's face twisted. You didn't fix the release valve? I didn't have to, I said. Nature did. Rick looked at me. The bodies, they'll wash, Whitaker said, voice trembling for the first time. The evidence, the records, all of it. No, I said, raising the drive from the lockbox. The truth's not buried in the lake anymore. It's digital. And it's going online. I tossed the thumb drive to Cassie. You know people. Make it loud. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashing lights cutting through the trees. Cops? Rick asked. Cassie shook her head. Feds. She looked at me. I didn't trust the sheriff either. Whitaker lunged, one last, desperate move. But Rick didn't miss this time. Bang. Whitaker dropped. Hard. Breathing. Alive. The kind of alive that spends years behind bars. 3 weeks later, the lake had flooded again, murky, reshaped, and carrying scars no brochure could hide. The HOA was dissolved. Charges filed. Rick turned himself in but walked free with a plea deal. Cassie sent the files everywhere, news outlets, watchdog groups, lawyers. My barn still stood barely. The dam, half repaired, waited for another storm. And the twist? Grandpa's last page. I found it the night after. Taped under the floorboards of the barn. One sentence, handwritten. They buried a body. I buried the truth. But you'll dig it up. And I had. Even if it cost me everything. The lake is still now. Not calm, never truly calm, but quieter. Like something deeper than water had finally exhaled. 3 months after the dam burst and the truth came rushing out with it. The town has started to breathe again too. Not forget. Not forgive. But face things. I walk the old trail behind the barn every morning now. Coffee in hand. Boots damp from dew. The barn's bones still stand. Charred around the edges from a lightning strike that hit the week after the investigation closed. Some folks called it an act of God. Others called it justice. Cassie stayed for a while. Long enough to help digitize the rest of Grandpa's notes and turn the evidence over to the feds. She didn't say goodbye when she left, just left a photo of us as kids on the porch. Wet, muddy, grinning with the old lake behind us. On the back, she'd written, "We can't unbury the past, but we don't have to build on it either." Rick's living upstate now under a new name, working on a restoration crew. He writes me sometimes, says he doesn't sleep much, but it's a clean kind of tired. The kind that comes from rebuilding something with your own hands. The HOA? Gone. Dissolved by court order. Their assets seized. Their secrets spilled. Whitaker's trial is set for the fall. They offered me a seat at the witness stand. I accepted. Not because I want revenge. Because I owe it to the land. To the truth. To Grandpa. And maybe to myself. See, I used to think the dam was what protected us. That wall of concrete holding everything back. But now I see it clearer. The dam was a monument to fear. A symbol of all the things people bury because they don't want to face them. But time has a way of breaking walls. The lake's back now, reshaped and raw. It doesn't look like it used to. Doesn't sparkle the same way in the sun. But maybe that's okay, because it's honest. And me? I've stopped fixing fences and started planting things. The land feels different under my hands now. Less like something to defend, more like something to understand. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the truth doesn't drown. It waits. So let it rise. Let it reshape everything. Because what we bury doesn't stay buried. Not forever. And maybe that's the point. If you're watching this and there's something you've been holding back, something buried under shame, or fear, or years of silence, I'm telling you now, dig it up. Look it in the eye. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. Because the only thing more dangerous than a dam ready to burst is a truth left unspoken. And that's a flood no one survives. Call to action: if this story moved you, share it. Not for views, not for clicks, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone out there is standing on their own dam, waiting for permission to let go. Be the reason they do.